call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and to see a symbol of perfect friendship among the United Nations.
Cultures. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular council meeting for March 20th, 2019. Following the Pledge of Allegiance, the first item is approval of the agenda. Councilors, I have no changes to make tonight, so I'll
Mr. Mayor,
entertain a
I'd make a motion that we approve this evening's agenda.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, council. Next item is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda, withholding item A for a little bit of a review. And there's a few things that got omitted in the version that is in our packet tonight. So I'd like to amend that and remove A from the consent agenda.
We got a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve tonight's consent agenda with the following change. Item A, Town Council meeting minutes for February 6, 2019 are being pulled. At the request of Councilor Abrams to amend some of the verbiage in it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, council. Is that better?
Much.
Okay. The next item is discussion items, and the first thing up is public comment on general matters. Tonight's first person up is Cheryl Hupperts.
I'm Cheryl Hupperts. I'm a citizen of the town of Edgewood. You know, we all have ideals, and then there's reality. Our governor has ideals, and whoever wrote this gun law that we've been discussing, and we believe that it'll stop mass shootings and suicides, or they believe, I guess. I don't believe mentally ill should have guns either, but there is a problem. We have HIPAA laws in place, so we don't know who the mentally ill are, and if we did know, we would know how mentally ill they need to be to not have a gun. So I believe that felons not having a gun is already on the books. Basically, law enforcement says that they don't know how they would enforce these laws, and they are understaffed. So personally, I agree with the Second Amendment sanctuary town, but we are part of Santa Fe County, and we know that our county is not going to vote to become a sanctuary county. We would probably be doing this as the only town in Santa Fe County. A lot of the cities have decided to become sanctuary cities, but they've also been part of a whole county that became a sanctuary county. So I'm a little bit concerned about if the council knows, and I hope that you've done research, I certainly haven't had time. Do we know, we will lose, if this was decided that our town would become a Second Amendment sanctuary town, would we lose funding? We get a lot of our funding from our state and from our county. We've recently got a pretty good relationship with Santa Fe County that didn't exist in the past. You know, we've talked about them having a blade down here to help us remove snow in the winter and whatnot. So I just wonder if this happened, if those kind of things might not come to exist. So I think the citizens of Edgewood, and I mean the people who live in the town, because a lot of people in our audience live outside of the city limits, so they wouldn't be affected by it. They would still get their roads plowed, paved, or whatever, you know. But we, the citizens who live in the town, would have to be willing to accept the consequences of the sanctuary city. I know, so I just encourage the council members, also to perhaps ask and see who lives in Edgewood. Not everyone in this audience does. I just happen to know a lot of people. They're living in the area, they have Edgewood addresses, or, they're close by, they shop here. But they might not suffer the consequences that the citizens would suffer if we do this. So I just want people to be aware, that I think we need to look at those consequences and weigh them out in that decision. And citizens of this town might vote for this, and then they'll be calling come snowstorm and say, we can't get out, our snow's, we're snowed in. And I think that's something we need to think about.
Thank you, Ms. Hupperts. Next person up is Tom McGill.
Yes.
I'm Tom McGill, 12 Buck Road here in Edgewood, New Mexico. After the council meeting last month, someone on social media asked the question, what happened to the ordinance at the meeting? And I replied on the social media that the council is going to hold a Saturday workshop with professionals and no public input. We're looking for someone to represent us. And then someone else came along and said, isn't that what the council and mayor is supposed to do? So, but at that meeting, Councilor Jaramillo warned of mission drift, and she was immediately ignored. But that's exactly what the problem is. The ordinance was made to support a way system to develop commercial growth. That's a specific task. It was designed for unbuilt high-density residents and commercial users, but it's being forced on built-out low-density users with no commercial potential application at all. It's no wonder there's no cost-effective, low-impact solution to this problem as it's presented. The facility is limited. If you do what you say you intend to do, you will quickly use up all of the capacity and all of our cash and all of our credit. If the goal is to kill all possible growth for this town, that is a good way to do it. While we're throwing our future away, I would like to point out this example of Las Cruces. That's 1988 to 2001. It's called the plan for taking over a public utility, in this case an electric company. It was El Paso Electric. The details are familiar compared to the ones that I gave you earlier. It was a 15-year battle. $8 million in legal fees, and it only ended when the attorneys told them they would take another 3 to 5 years to fight it. At that time, they had already taken out bonds they were paying interest on, and they had no income. The city manager said, this is a quote, that they had a winning hand, but they just ran out of money. El Paso Electric, and for that, the ratepayers paid $23 million to settle, but they kept the franchise. The incumbents lost their seats, but there were two features in this article that I sent you that I would like to point, one in particular I'd like to point your attention to, and that is that there were a lot of internal costs that are incalculable. Can you imagine, for example, what the staff would have to do over 3 years, whatever it takes, in terms of preparation, compliance, and so on, plus the amount of time it takes for the council people to deal with it every single meeting, probably, that's my guess. And, but beyond that, it points out because Las Cruces did have the people on their side when they started, but you don't. You're doing it in secret. You're not giving any details, any justification. And Mr. Simons here has sent you a survey, an informal, unscientific survey, which he will update, that shows that 2 to 1 right now the citizens would oppose the idea of taking over EPCOR, for example. But I would say that any business school would tell you, as you know, that they would never allow a municipality to take on a lengthy, expensive project based on a biased, seriously flawed preliminary engineering report for no expressed gain, without community support in the face of capable, committed opposition. when this is all over and Edgewood has become famous, be prepared to, be prepared to answer this question, just what did you think would happen? And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. McGill.
Thank you.
Next person up is Patricia Retta.
My name is Patricia Rita, and I've been up in the East Mountain area since 1980. I'm also an RN, and I work in Albuquerque as a registered nurse. I oppose the Second Amendment, making Edgewood a Second Amendment town. I oppose having guns that shoot military-style weapon guns for the general use and mostly abuse. I don't see any reason for it. Anybody here who wants to have everybody having guns needs to spend some time in an ER and see what happens. But most of you won't, because I don't think that I don't think they think about it. We just had a little kid killed and dumped on Cedar Crest, shot 3 times by a 17-year-old, 15-year-old kid shot. And I'm disgusted, and hope to God it doesn't pass. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rita. Next person up is Bryce Simons.
Good morning. I must apologize to everybody. I sent a computer PowerPoint presentation to you all over the weekend, not knowing, like John said, that the computers just do exactly what you tell them. I didn't realize that I had told it to include a hyperlink to another file that I hadn't included. So the ones I sent to you, I don't believe work properly. So I put some printouts on your test that do read properly. And the concern that I'm pursuing here is the efficacy of the efforts that we're making as a community to try and determine what the consensus, if there is such a thing in this town, is for where this town is going to go and how it's going to grow. Now, Sherry put out a survey here about a month or so ago, and it was a real quick, simple, easy survey. And you can see on the second page what the questions were. They're fairly basic. I think they're easily understood. I think what is particularly intriguing is if you go to the third page, 22 computers basically answered over 25% of all of the responses issued. One of those computers was used 21 times to generate repeated responses to this survey. The obvious intent to bias the conclusion I thought was intriguing. There's a couple more pages in here, and if you go to page, I believe it's 6, and then 6, 7, or 7, 8, and 9, show some pie charts that I think are pretty intriguing in terms of the effect that if we had just counted the data as presented without any consideration or thought, what the conclusion would have been compared to what happens if we just count each response once. Makes a pretty compelling difference. The difference is obvious in question 1. Difference is obvious in question 2. It's pretty intriguing in question 3. And so what I come to be concerned about, this is my understanding, it's an effort to try and determine where we want to go as a town, what we want to do as a town, whether we want to pursue condemnation of a water system, whether we want to grow with a sewage system that we have or some alternate that we haven't evaluated yet. But the surveys that we've got here, I think, are subject to question. I think we need to be careful how we interpret them. The survey that Murcog did was a good survey, but it certainly wasn't bulletproof. Even though it was set up so that the same computer couldn't answer twice, all you had to do was go to a different computer, cell phone, iPad, whatever. All of those have different numbers on them, and respond. So with the obvious motivation that some apparently have to bias the results, there is zero doubt in my mind that there is some biasing of the Murcog survey. So we need to be careful how to depend on how strongly we want to rely on the conclusions from that survey. Additionally, if we've got a total response, I think the Murcog survey had something in the neighborhood of 450 or 60 responses That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 10% of the town's voting population. This survey had, depends on where you want to look at the filtered to the unfiltered, a little over 200 to 300 responses. That's a bit less. But in either case, pure statistics would suggest that it's too small a sample size to have a very strong, compelling conclusion reached from any of these surveys. So my request to the council is to be careful how much credibility, how much importance we place in what some have stated to be a clear mandate, when in fact, I think we've got proof here that it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simons.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, Mr. Simons, are you aware of how IP tracking works for
Yes, I am.
SurveyMonkey?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware that there is a shortage of IP addresses on the internet worldwide, and that there is a standard function used to expand the number of IP addresses called NAT?
No, I would have to defer to you, John. I'm not up on that one.
NAT basically puts many computers behind a single IP address. So your premise, although noble, probably not real.
Well, think
I
we
have
discussed-
more than 20,000 computers behind a single set of IP addresses at the university. So it depends on how you set up your SurveyMonkey,
Yes, it does.
and I don't know how this one was set up.
And it depends
So
also
without
on what the
without a
network is.
whole lot of sleuthing, I'm a little reticent to accept statistics. Thank you.
Well, whether you're reticent or not, I think there's still a legitimate suggestion here to endorse being careful in terms of how we pursue
Certainly.
and scrutinize this information.
Certainly. Surveys are imperfect, all of them.
Next person up is Heather Mitchell.
I've lived in the town of Edgewood for 25 years. I support the Second Amendment, and the outpouring of residents that we had at the last meeting and the emotion we had supported the Second Amendment for us to become a sanctuary town. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I want to talk about is the sewer. I live on a street with 11 houses. We've never had our road plowed. It's a private road. We do not want to connect to the sewer system. There's only 11 houses. Most are single persons or two people. It's not going to create enough waste for the town of Edgewood for their sewer system. And the amount of money it will cost to run up our road is phenomenal. Some of us are over 250 feet from the street and won't have to hook up. So I want the council to consider Ridgewood annexed out of the sewer system because we don't need it. We're a private road. Nobody comes down. If there's one car in the road, it's a traffic jam. We don't want it. My neighbors don't want it. And I'm here to speak on that. It's 11 houses. We've never had the road plowed. We have no maintenance. We drive our own. We plow each other out. That's the way our neighborhood goes. And nobody on Ridgewood Road wants the waste system up our road. There's large rocks that'll have to be blown out with dynamite, and that's going to cause structural damage to our roads. The engineers say they'll repair the roads, but we don't want it, and I don't think that we need to have it. There's 11 of us, and we will be certified by the state in the environmental department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Next person up is Ted Hupperts. Oh, okay. That brings up Evelyn Vinogradov.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, citizens. My name is Evelyn Vinogrado, retired Moriarty High School teacher, 31-year resident of Edgewood. As of 2017, New Mexico had the 7th highest gun ownership rate in the nation. 50% of our population owns guns. The national average is 30. After years of debate, New Mexico lawmakers recently moved to enact a few revamped gun laws. They closed some loopholes. And this is good because New Mexico's rate of firearm deaths per capita has also been consistently higher than the national average. As of 2017, the Department of Health statistics show we had the nation's 10th highest rate of deaths caused by firearms. That's 18.5 per 100,000 people. I applaud those New Mexico cities and counties rethinking and/or rejecting the Second Amendment resolution. Taos, Mountain Air, Bernalillo County, Santa Fe County, for example. Many law enforcement agencies, APD included, do support expanded background checks, etc. What we are talking about here is common sense gun legislation that will withstand any potential legal scrutiny because it's deemed entirely constitutional. Expanded background checks, allowing court-ordered seizures of guns from individuals deemed to pose an immediate danger, barring those convicted of a domestic violence offense from having a gun. Second Amendment resolutions, which some people have called purely symbolic, state that their counties and cities would not require officers to enforce some gun-related laws. Seriously? Should we even symbolically allow our taxpayer-funded law enforcement agencies to ignore some laws that they're hired to enforce? It's not yet been tested whether such Second Amendment resolutions and ordinances would stand up in court if challenged. Do Edgewood taxpayers really want to take the chance of being the test case to see how this resolution will hold up in court? Yes. Do we really want our police to make a snap decision to ignore rule of law in the heat of the moment? Especially the two that you hired at the last meeting. Brand new green cops.
Be respectful.
Do we really want to pay a bunch of constitutional lawyers to battle this out in court over a symbolic, and let me reiterate, symbolic resolution? That's all this is, really. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Vinogradov. Next person up, Ted. I don't know if it's got Ted Huppert. You still want to pass? Okay. That would bring up Mitch Barnes. Mitch Barnes.
Hi, I'm Mitch Barnes from Edgewood, south of Edgewood, up on Ridge Road. Mayor, council members, and chief, my neighbors. I just wanted to say that I strongly support the resolution to declare Edgewood a Second Amendment sanctuary township. We cannot allow the weak, despicable leadership in Santa Fe to override our rights afforded by the Constitution and our forefathers. I think that most law enforcement would agree this is completely unenforceable, and it would just waste time when they could be doing important matters, taking care of important matters, chasing down people with guns that are doing wrong, that are killing people on North 14 and people at our gas station at Smith's. We need to be able to protect ourselves, and this nips away at our rights. If people want to change the law, there's a place to do it. March down to Washington and petition Congress to change the Constitution. That's how you do it. You don't do it by picking away at a right that we all have. I have faith in you members to do the right thing and vote to make our township a sanctuary town for the Second Amendment. I'd like to hear from all others. If you're not signed up, come speak. Now's the time. It's important to make your voice heard. Now's the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person up is John Bohm.
Chief, council members, I'd like to start off saying you hear a lot of arguments against making it a sanctuary city or sanctuary county, mainly because, like, well, you can't pick and choose the laws that you choose to enforce, which before the immigration status came up, that was a perfectly legitimate argument. But now that it's something that the liberals choose to not side with, now it's an issue. So to argue for sanctuary cities for legal immigrants, but saying you can't do that for Second Amendment makes zero sense. Next, the gun legislation, as others have said, is completely unenforceable. Every other law in the books already cover everything that would enforce reducing crime via gun crime with criminals. This law will only be enforceable with mandatory firearm transfer background checks with gun registration. The federal government doesn't have a gun registration database. ATF doesn't. No one does. But yet the state wants to. The only real purpose of gun registration is for confiscation, which moves to the red flag law. Red flag law violates minimum the Second, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment. Sixth Amendment, you don't know who your accuser are. You never will. Somebody shows up at 2 o'clock at your door, a bunch of cops, they confiscate every firearm you have. You will never know who has made allegations against you. Due process, none. You're deemed guilty before innocent. There's so many red flags that should be coming up, speaking of red flag laws. This is simply not, it's not legal, it's not the will of the people, and I don't think it's something that we should support and waste our officers' time with. I think there's been too many deaths already for red flag confiscations, which I can speak personally. If somebody showed up 2 o'clock in the morning with, if I didn't have my wits about me, as I think a lot of other people could, this scenario would be repeated. Red flag law, gun legislation, all of it reeks. It's unconstitutional, doesn't belong. And for those reasons, I support Edgewood becoming Second Amendment sanctuary city. Thank you for doing it.
Next person up is Louis Abraham.
Mayor, council, chief, you either stand for something or you fall for anything. If you don't support this country and its constitution, you should leave it. As far as the Second Amendment and why it's taught, why we're armed, it is not for anyone except the people to fight off the government. It is for a hostile government takeover. I heard a laugh. You read the Constitution, you read the federal papers, that's what it says. We have the right to bear arms to keep the government from taking our will away from us. You can come up with all these useless excuses on why you shouldn't have a gun. Somebody's going to get killed, somebody's going to do this. The bigger picture is the government is going to take your country over. And that's why you have that Second Amendment right. As far as what I had prepared, a large number of proponents for sanctuary status for illegal immigrants in the state of New Mexico will oppose the sanctuary status of the Second Amendment gun rights, saying that the latter is unconstitutional. The Second Amendment is already constitutional. It is a part of the Constitution of the United States of America. It is our law. On the other hand, sanctuary status for illegals has no legal standing, and yet the governor intends for this statute to be fully enforced by law enforcement. To have it both ways is total hypocrisy. I urge you to vote for the town of Edgewood to be on record as a Second Amendment sanctuary town with the same force behind it as the governor's illegal immigrant statutes. Thank you.
Ronald Siegers? Siegel.
Mayor, councilors, I'm not a resident of Edgewood. I live outside in Torrance County, just a third of a mile or so. I shop here. I pay sales tax, obviously, and a portion of that goes to Edgewood. So I believe taxation without representation isn't correct. I'm not opposed to the Second Amendment by any means, but I am opposed to the resolution. And I kind of feel like, you know, a lot of the speakers, the previous meeting and at this meeting, keep saying it's unconstitutional. Well, that's the court of public opinion. You know, it's really up to our courts to decide whether something is constitutional or not. And I don't think we should, you know, just assume that it's unconstitutional. The existing limitations on our Second Amendment rights have proved to be constitutional, and so I don't question whether these new laws are going to, you know, necessarily end up being unconstitutional. One thing I'm concerned about is the status quo isn't working. You know, our kids are getting killed across the country. You know, violence in churches and mosques and synagogues. You know, it's not working. And I see these laws that the state legislature has implemented and as an attempt to try to address the problem. And I think it's well worth seeing whether it will work or not, or help. I don't think it's going to solve everything. And I don't think they think it'll solve everything either, but it's a step perhaps in the right direction. Anyway, I mean, I'm opposed to the resolution. And on a couple other issues on the water, the issue of purchasing the water system, I'm on the UpCor water system, so I would be affected. Every time it's changed ownership, our rates went up. You know, if you can accomplish this without increasing rates, great. But if the rates are going to end up going up, you know, I'm opposed to it. And then one other issue is roads. There's a lot of sections that are gravel. You go from pavement to gravel to pavement to gravel. When is the city going to completes the sections in between. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Siegel. Next person up is Jordan Hall.
Mayor, members of the council, I want to come up here and show my support for the Second Amendment resolution. You've heard a lot of the arguments between the last meeting and this meeting. A couple other points I want to make is New Mexico is a great state. I've lived in a lot of western states. I keep coming back here. One of the things that has always brought me back is the freedoms and rights we have here as opposed to many other states. As great as New Mexico is, we do have two major problems throughout the state. It's crime and the economy. We have a sluggish economy compared to our neighbors. We have a major crime issue. These laws implemented by Santa Fe are not going to solve the crime issue. They're going to make a whole lot of criminals out of the people in this room. Furthermore, our economy. The more restrictive our government becomes, the more people that are not going to want to move here, including myself. I would move my business elsewhere if this state continues to become more restrictive on my rights as a citizen. So with that said, I hope you guys will pass this resolution, take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last person signed up. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I apologize, I didn't know there was a sign-up sheet. My name is Matthew McQueen. I'm a state representative. I don't live in Edgewood, but I represent about half the town. I live up in Galisteo. And I want to come down tonight and talk to you about some of these gun laws that the legislature passed. So the legislature passed two gun laws of note. One is Senate Bill 8, which is a background check bill, and the other is Senate Bill 328, which relates to domestic violence. So the background check bill closes what I consider loopholes in our existing background check system. So our background check system only applies to FFLs, federal firearm licensees of gun stores. But you can still buy a gun over the internet or at a gun show. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Let him speak. Let him speak.
Senate Bill 8 closes that loophole by applying it to private gun sales unless the gun is inoperable, like an antique, or you're selling it to a relative. Senate Bill 328 relates to domestic violence. So already under existing gun laws, if you're a felon, you can't have a gun. Senate Bill 328 expands that to include convictions for domestic violence abuses, even if they're short of a felony, and also expands it to include people who are subject to domestic violence restraining orders. Because one thing we know about domestic violence is that it's way more dangerous when there's a gun in the house. And it's especially dangerous for women. So your resolution, the proposed resolution, talks about a law that unconstitutionally infringes on the right of people to keep and bear arms. And I think the question is, who decides? Who decides what's unconstitutional? If a court has determined that the law is unconstitutional, and I believe, by the way, both these laws that were just passed are constitutional. If a court determines that a law is unconstitutional, well then yes, it's unenforceable. And no one disputes that. So if that's the case, you probably don't need a resolution. But if this resolution is suggesting or implying or hinting at the idea that local elected officials or local law enforcement are the ones who decide whether or not something's constitutional, then I think you're headed down a really dangerous path. In our system, our democratic system, If you have an issue with the law, you go to court. You don't take the law into your own hands to either enforce or not enforce. That's not the way it works. Because it was brought up, I'd like to touch on the immigration issue. Immigration laws are by their nature federal. So all the immigration laws that exist in the United States are federal law. States and municipalities can't adopt immigration laws. And so what the sanctuary, that use of the word sanctuary is, and it's probably not a good word, but it's basically communities saying, okay, it's federal law, the feds have to enforce their law. We're not going to do it for them. And they're not under any obligation to do it. But what this is state law. And the town of Edgewood is a political subdivision of the state of New Mexico. So you are bound to enforce state law. If you have a problem with it, take it to court. I don't have a problem with that. But as written, one law has already been signed. The other I expect to be signed. I know the first one's constitutional, the second one's probably constitutional too. It becomes state law, and it becomes your obligation to enforce that law unless you want to challenge it in court. So I encourage you, when it comes time to vote on this resolution, to think about that and think about how you're going to vote. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McQueen. Is there anybody else not signed up who would like to speak? Mr. Seegers.
Mayor, councilors, I heard some mention about worrying about Santa Fe County might take it out on us if we don't, if we go for this resolution, and I'm a strong supporter of the resolution. We forget where we came from. We seceded from Santa Fe County because they gave us no goods, no services, wouldn't pay any attention to us, passed laws we were opposed to, and that's how this town got formed. It's worth remembering, okay? But, I'm a shooter, an owner of guns. My children are shooters, owners of guns. We hunt, we fish, we target practice, we shoot sporting clays, SAS. We do a ton of recreation that way. But we also have a gun or two laying around to protect ourselves. A policeman that came up here and spoke at the last meeting pointed out that it's almost impossible for any of our local law enforcement to react to a home invasion situation or anything else that you might run into out in the country. And I strongly believe, that some of the crime that's spilling over out of Albuquerque, which has one of the most horrible crimes rates in the country, is now spilling in out here. We've had a murder down at Smith's. We've had a lot of things happen. And, I also am a owner of a concealed carry permit, and I don't let anybody know I haven't. I don't talk about it, and then the last thing I'd ever want to do is take a life, but I certainly would do it to protect my family and myself. This resolution is really this council and mayor supporting what the citizens of Edgewood believe in and want. And I don't think you can get more representation in a meeting in this town on a subject like this than we've had, this meeting and the previous meeting. So this is about supporting your citizens, and I do think you should pass this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers.
I'm Carol Harmon. Kind of threw my notes together here. First of all, nobody wants to see crime, suicide, domestic violence, any of that. But you have to get to the real reason. And the red flag law supposedly is going to solve all this. Suicide, usually there's hopelessness, depression, they hear voices, they lose touch with reality. Domestic violence, it's anger, jealousy, rejection. Crime, you have a lot of gang violence, retribution, drug use, breaking into homes, home invasions. Sometimes there's just plain evil people. We have to recognize that. But the others are mental health issues. They're human emotional issues. Man has an evil nature, and if they don't take control of it, or have God in their life. They just have no moral compass, don't think anything of hurting other people. So restricting guns isn't going to do anything. England took away guns, now they have a problem with knives and machetes. They're trying to regulate those. So when somebody's going to commit a crime, they're going to commit it, you know, and it's human emotions. But it's really a mental health problem and a drug addiction problem, and that's where you got to tackle it from. And the Second Amendment, its purpose from its inception had nothing to do with crime, suicide, or domestic violence. It has to do with self-protection and protection against the government when they get overpowered. The British tried to take it away from us, and we had a war of independence from Britain. And everything in this book stands by itself. It's not under public health and safety. You know, you can't take it, and it has its own category. Constitution, do not touch, you know. You're trying to mix it in with civil rights laws and everything else. And it says do not infringe, and there were 5 or 6 bills in Santa Fe. Each one of them shreds them, and they didn't all pass, but shred another little piece, another little piece, another little piece off. Yeah. And also on that red flag law, the accuser immediately gets a judge. She goes in, they have to find a judge right then and there. But the one who's accused doesn't get that. They have no chance to defend themselves or figure out if the accuser is lying or just jealousy and revenge. You know, so if they pass that, then the same rights have to be given to the accused as the accuser. Right then and there, they call them both in. You know, and if they need to take the gun away, fine. The accuser needs to get out of the house, number one. You take your kids and you leave, or whatever. And also, we never hear about all the times guns save lives. There was a judge that caught a burglar in southern New Mexico just yesterday. He came out, somebody's trying to break into his car. Guy just got out of jail and said, oh, I thought it was my car. You know, but we have home invasions. They follow you home from Walmart in town to rip you off and stuff. So everybody needs to have a gun, and where there's gun-free zones is where all your tragedies occur. At all the school shootings, they were almost always by a student who had gone to that school and left and was bullied or just mad or whatever. So they need to kind of see what's going on in the schools and what's going on with our youth, that they're so out of control. Also, state and counselors are all under this Constitution. It says thou shalt not infringe on the right. It's very clear. We don't need somebody to interpret it, you know. So they need to go by this and not by emotional issues, which does nothing. So I recommend that you pass the Second Amendment sanctuary bill. Thank you.
Ma'am, what was your name?
Carol Harmon.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Chief, and citizens, I'm John McCauley from over on Horton and Edgewood. I'd like to remind everybody that not only is the Second Amendment from our Bill of Rights, our federal Constitution protects our rights against infringement for our ownership of firearms. Our state constitution in part says no municipality or county shall regulate in any way an incident of the right to keep and bear arms. That's stronger than even infringement. They're trying to regulate it. Retired law enforcement officer with over 34 years experience. I too, ma'am, have seen a lot of shootings, stabbings, beatings over the years, and it is ugly. By and large, it's not. It's done by the criminals. That's why we have law enforcement. Criminals do not follow the laws. This bill number 8 that's already been passed and signed isn't going to enforce or make anybody safer. A criminal is not going to go get a background check. They buy their firearms on the black market or steal them. The good chief here can attest to that without any problem, I'm sure. That's my experience. We talk about common sense laws. There's no sense in them. How are the laws going to save lives? How are they going to be enforced? How are you going to make criminals follow the laws? You can't do that. By definition, a criminal doesn't follow the laws. I understand people want to make things safer, but they're not common sense written into these laws. They're not going to expand anything. They're not going to help anything for the reasons mentioned. And we're talking with emotions only from that side. A Second Amendment sanctuary resolution is a guide for that entity. It's not a law. That's true. But with this resolution being in favor of the Constitution of the state of New Mexico and the United States, it's in support of it, not against it, like the sanctuary cities have claimed on immigration. Law enforcement are sworn to uphold the Constitution and defend it. And if something's in violation of it, in their heart, they can't do that. The numbers quoted for the number of people killed in New Mexico with firearms is skewed. By the legislature's own analysis that they used, they left out 17% of those killings in New Mexico were justified homicides. 2/3 of them were suicides. Having background checks, forcing people to try and get them, isn't going to keep a suicide from happening. If someone wants to kill themselves, unfortunately, they're going to without some kind of medical intervention. The gun is just a tool. Again, in my years in law enforcement, I've seen people try multiple times. They will succeed at some point. It doesn't make any difference what the method is. We can equate it to DWIs in the state. Look at the high incidence of DWI crashes and deaths in the state each year. Should we make them go through a triple I, which is an investigative tool to see what their record is, see if they have previous DWIs, and not sell them a car because they got drunk once? Doesn't make sense. I urge you very strongly and would appreciate you to pass this resolution.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
McCauley. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Mayor, Council, Chief.
Your name?
I'm glad to be here and speak up for the Second
Sir,
Amendment.
what is your name?
Barry Barber. I lived in Edgewood for 12 years now. Excuse me. Back during the time of Hitler, everyone had to register their guns. 2 years later, the Gestapo came through, took all the guns of all the citizens in Germany. The Jews had no reason to protect themselves. 6 million Jews were killed. In Venezuela, they came along and said no citizen can own guns. The citizens cannot protect themselves from the government anymore. They're dying in droves. They're eating animals. They're killing all the animals in the zoos. They're eating them. They have no medicine, nothing to protect them. If we give in to the laws coming from Santa Fe, we are giving in to socialism. We're not a socialist government. We are a republic. The forefathers knew what they were doing when they said bearing arms is a right of all citizens. from things that had happened in Europe over the years. So I don't want us to go into a socialist state. I want us to be able to protect ourselves. All gun owners have been through a background check. They're good people. They're not going to go out and kill anybody, just like the previous chef said. It's the illegals who get guns. They steal them. They buy them on the black market. The laws aren't going to affect that. People are still going to be killed because the illegals won't follow any rules. So I'm asking the Edgewood to consider stand up for our Constitution, stand up for the Second Amendment, because if we don't stand up for it, we'll lose all of our rights, and we will become a socialist nation, and who knows how many millions of us will be killed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Anybody else? This other gentleman.
Hello. I talked last time. My name is Officer Wesley Jackson with the Albuquerque Police Department. I'd like to clarify just a couple of things that a couple of citizens have said. First one is domestic violence. In the last year, in 2019, we've had 2 homicides that I've been a part of in Albuquerque. And I know Albuquerque is different than Edgewood, but that's the only thing I can relate to because I work there. Both those homicides were by the boyfriend to the girlfriend. Girlfriend ended up passing away. Both these homicides did not include guns. One of them was a cell phone cord. They strangled her. The other one was a piece of string. I understand that guns can be used for killing people, but it's not what is a common thing, because most of these people that have had these problems before have been convicted of domestic violence. Domestic violence is like a felony. To have gun ownership taken away, you have to actually be convicted of a felon. You have to be a convicted felon. You just being charged doesn't mean your guns get taken away. You have to be convicted. Domestic violence is the same way. You need to be convicted of domestic violence before your gun rights are taken away. Restraining orders for domestic violences. Anybody can file a restraining order. It takes no probable cause, no conviction, nothing. We hand out packets all the time. Whenever we go to a domestic violence, whether or not there's charges pressed or not, I will hand them a domestic violence restraining order packet. All they have to do is go down to the courts and file it. The only thing the restraining order says is the petitioner, which is the person that wants the restraining order, the respondent, who is kind of like the convicted party in a way, can't contact them in any way. That's the only thing it says. And if they do get contacted by cell phone, third party, or in person, we can write a criminal summons, which is a misdemeanor. That's all it is. So there's no reason, in my opinion, for somebody, if an RO or a restraining order is against you, why you shouldn't own guns. That's nothing to do with law. It's a civil issue. Another one I'd like to talk about is buying guns over the internet. If a firearm is shipped, it has to go through an FFL, a federal firearms license. You can't just ship it to your house. There are a couple of things that are different though. A black powder gun or a muzzleloader do not have to be transferred through an FFL. So they can be shipped directly to your house. The only difference, you can buy 6-round revolvers that are repeat fire and black powder that you can ship directly to your house. Nobody's ever talking about those. Why, if we want to limit the regular actual firearms, why aren't we limiting the black powder guns? That makes no sense to me. Gun violence is just, it's everywhere. There's a lot of places you can pick up guns. In my opinion, securing the border is our first step. There are so many firearms that come in through the border. In the United States, you cannot own a fully automatic where you hold down the trigger and it just keeps firing unless it's built before 1976. You cannot own anything newer than that. We are finding guns, not me personally, but other officers that I know, are finding fully automatic AR-15 style rifles in Albuquerque that were built, manufactured, and sold in Mexico. It is a federal law that you cannot import those firearms. So I'm not sure, those guns are not coming into this country legally. And I'm not sure how we can combat that without shutting down the border. If we're limiting the number of guns that our citizens can have, how do we even go up against some of that stuff? I'm a law enforcement officer. I can't even have a fully automatic firearm. And I'm certified. That makes no sense. And I'm up against this kind of stuff. 2 years ago, there was a storage facility in Albuquerque that was broken into. In the storage facility were a lot of what are called prop guns, or the ones that they use for movies. They are fully automatic. And what's really funny is the only thing you have to change to make these actual firearms is what's called the upper receiver, or the barrel. That's the only thing you have to change. And you can buy those without background checks. There were 15 guns stolen from this facility, and every single one of them was fully automatic. So now we have 15 fully automatic firearms from the movie industry that are out on the streets. But we're not doing anything to make sure that they don't get them, in the sense of the movie industry. That makes no sense either. So why are we limiting what we can just rightfully have as citizens when the criminals are getting them no matter what? There was a homicide that on the 14th of this month where a 15-year-old was found on Highway 14. He was dead. What's really funny is a good friend of mine, a partner of mine, was the one who took the missing persons report for that 15-year-old. The people that ended up killing him was 19 and 17. They didn't use a firearm. They used a baseball bat. They still die. People still get killed. It was drug related. As far as we can tell, it was drug related. It doesn't matter if you take guns away. You can't legally own a handgun unless you're 21 years of age or older. You can buy a long gun at 18. Long gun is a rifle or a shotgun. I'm finding kids that are under the age of 21 with firearms all the time. They're not legally buying them. They're not going through a background check, and they will never go through a background check because they don't have to. They're finding these guns everywhere, and it's not from people that are legally buying them from FFLs. So I urge you to please consider the Second Amendment city, Edgewood as a Second Amendment city, so we can at least push back on the next step that they're trying to take our guns away. There's an old quote. A lot of people believe it was from Thomas Jefferson. Nobody really knows. The quote goes, "Citizens who pound their guns into plows will plow for those who do not." In the sense of the people that give up their firearms will be ruled by the people that still have them. And we see that in Germany through the Nazis. We see it in South Korea before they split from North Korea. We're seeing it a lot. And this is just another step to start taking away our guns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
Mayor, Chief, Council, I just want to take a second chance to go over a few things that came up. Things like gun show loopholes, which is, I'm not sure the loophole is. I've looked. I've yet to see one. As an FFL, there is no loophole. You go to a gun show and you buy from a private citizen, you can buy a gun. If you go buy it from a table or another FFL, you do a background check. There's no loophole there. Internet sales. I'm not sure where the information one individual got, but you cannot buy a gun over the internet without a background check. Not legally, anyway. Domestic violence. You can't sell a gun to anyone who's been convicted of domestic violence, is under investigation for domestic violence, or is awaiting prosecution of any sort for domestic violence. already a law. I'm not sure what else is thrown in there for kicks, but the law and the point has already been made. There was a statement made of not knowing if a law that has been passed is constitutional or not. I find that ludicrous. How does a lawmaker pass a law not knowing if it's constitutional? Anybody have an answer? To me, that's just stupid. I can't think of a better word. If you don't know if it's lawful or constitutional, how in the hell did somebody vote for it and make it a law? Anyway, the greater point to these gun legislation that have been passed is, the bigger question is, how are they going to enforce them? The point is that the laws as written are toothless. The only way that these laws will ever mean anything is with additional legislation that will place a gun registration. I think everyone here knows that gun registration, one, will irk a whole lot of people for very many reasons. You can cite numerous sources through history, but the fact is, gun registration has always ended up being used to implement gun confiscation. Whether that's red flag laws or you go to Hitler, to whatever it is, history should not be repeated. Gun registration is not something that the government needs to get into, and unfortunately that's the only way these gun legislation will have any teeth. Second, or third, fourth, this state is great because of the liberties that have been preserved up until this point. Grew up here, and it was always a matter of pride and bragging of other service members that I was proud to serve with that have lived in California or New York or wherever. Well, you know, when you get tired of it, come to New Mexico. And this state has turned on its heels very quickly. And they're not listening to the voice of the people. There's already been advanced a petition to the Attorney General to overturn the House bill, I believe number 8, number 6, whatever it was, with the universal background checks. The voice of the people will be heard, just as it's being heard now. Just a matter of who's listening. I encourage you guys to listen. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who hasn't spoken that would like to?
My name is Misty Miller. I'm a resident of the town of Edgewood. I am a business owner, a mother, a daughter, a sister, and I support the town of Edgewood designation as a Second Amendment sanctuary city. I'm with SAS, the Single Action Shooting Society, and have been for 10 years. Our world headquarters is located here. We moved out of California because of restrictive gun laws as a show of support to our over 100,000 members worldwide. I have an interesting perspective because we are an international membership organization. And we have affiliates in countries all over Europe, you know, over 30 foreign countries. In Europe, Australia, and I've had hundreds, countless of conversations with our members who struggle with, you know, they don't have the same rights we have here. And it falls under that's that Second Amendment right that we kind of all have a tendency to take for granted until it's threatened. And, you know, our Constitution was built on, at the beginning of this meeting, everyone in this room stood up and placed our hands over our heart or to a salute to that flag. And we pledged allegiance to the United States of America. And this country was built on the Constitution, by the people, for the people. So People scoff when Hitler's brought up, or they scoff when we talk about being invaded by the British, but the fact remains that the sieges still come. They come in different forms. And it was George Washington who said that what sets the American patriot apart from every other person in the world is that we will die on our feet before we live on our knees. So I just ask that you consider making Edgewood a Second Amendment sanctuary city.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Anybody else who hasn't? Come on up, sir.
I'm short. This needs to come down where you can hear me.
And your name, sir?
My name is Gerald Baker. I'm a board member of the Single Action Shooting Society, and our headquarters are just down the road that way. First, I'd like to thank the council for actually listening. I made numerous trips to Santa Fe and was in committee hearings, and I watched our representatives text back and forth, laugh at each other. I watched them get up and walk out in the middle of a committee hearing. I watched them pay no attention to the law enforcement officers that were telling them, this bill we cannot enforce. Whether we want to or not, we can't. Didn't pay a bit of attention. I watched the expressions on the faces in many of those committees. We had legislators whose minds were made up. They didn't listen at all. Not one bit. They wasted our time and theirs. So it's a breath of fresh air to see that all of you at least appear to be paying attention. We watch sponsors of bills introduce a bill they cannot explain. Now, how does a legislator do that? How do you sponsor a bill and sit in front of a committee and not be able to answer what's in your bill? So they turn to a so-called expert witness, and I've watched him tell them that it said something that I had in my hand. It ain't here, okay? So again, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to see that you are listening. I think what we're seeing here, and we've wandered off in the weeds a little bit, what we're seeing here is a bit of civilian pushback. Every time a gun bill comes up, it doesn't aim at the criminal. It aims at the law-abiding citizen. It puts one more level of red tape, one more hoop you got to jump through. Eventually, you can regulate a right out of existence if you keep that up. And what we're saying with this resolution is enough. Try passing a law that affects the criminal. Okay? And I'll leave you with a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. from a letter in a jailhouse in Alabama. It said, "You have a legal and moral obligation to follow just laws. Conversely, you have a moral obligation to disobey unjust laws." I hope you pass the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Hi, my name is Debbie Whitaker. I'm just a regular citizen. I don't know a lot about gun laws. I don't know all the details. I don't have the experience that a lot of people have that have talked. But I live next to a dangerous neighbor. And unfortunately, hands are tied on being able to move forward. My life has been threatened. He has threatened to rape me. He has sat looking in my window. We are helpless to do anything while we wait for the system to take care of this. I will not give up my guns because of that. I am a law-abiding person. I have never been arrested. I am not a troublemaker. But restricting my right to bear arms when I have a neighbor that is bearing arms that is not supposed to, again, red tape, it's an issue. And the thing that we need to consider, these laws that are being passed, we're talking about a governor that's only been in office for a few months. These are the first of the laws. More are going to come. And if we don't take a stand now and become a sanctuary city, eventually there's going to be laws passed that are going to be more than any of us can bear. Once our guns are taken, once they are registered and they can be confiscated, the governor has already tried to introducing a confiscation law. Confiscation is going to require registration. Once you are registered, your guns can be taken, and there's not a lot you can do. They know what you have, they know where you live. And if they choose to do this, we have a point at that point whether we're going to take a stand or allow ourselves to be disarmed. We really need to think about the direction things are going and try to prevent this from being an issue in the future. Right now, the gun control laws that are being passed are not completely unlivable. They are intrusive, but they're only going to get worse. This is just the beginning. And I really encourage the council to protect our rights, to protect ourselves from criminals. You know, unfortunately, so many laws protect people that when you do have a problem, no matter what you do and how hard you fight, you have to be able to protect your home. And I am newly registered concealed carry owner because of issues that I'm having, and I am no longer safe in my house. I am not safe in this town. I have to watch all the time. We have security cameras that run 24/7. I've got 6 cameras on my house because of one bad neighbor. The city is working with us. We are working through it. I don't have anything bad to say about it. It's happening, but it's a very slow process. In the meantime, if this person does show up on my property with a gun, the police will not be there in time to protect me. And that is the bottom line of this. And there are a lot of people out there in these situations where we are doing nothing wrong, and we are being the ones that are having laws put on us to restrict our right to protect ourselves. So please pass this. All the citizens want this. I think the number of people in support of this is overwhelming, and I believe most law enforcement people would also be in favor of it. Politicians, of course, there's an agenda, and that's just how it is. But I really appreciate your time and listening, and I hope you consider protecting your citizens.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who hasn't spoken? Okay, seeing none. We'll move along. Okay, the next item on our agenda then is matters from Chief of Police, Chief Ron Crow. Chief Crow.
Mayor, Council, and everybody that's attending, thank you for coming out and actually supporting your First Amendment right to come up and speak. I definitely appreciate it. I like seeing the actual turnout in council meetings. Usually we look out there and there's 3 or 4 people present in the council meeting, so it's nice to see something that the community is passionate about and they're coming forward with it. So I'm going to go a little off topic because mine is completely unrelated to this, so don't think I'm taking anything away from it. I promised you a 2018 review of our stats at the department. With everything going on at the agency lately, I haven't been able to get that done. It's going to be this next go around, but we have made a few steps in the right direction at the department lately. Needed to update you on. So our GPS units are now working in our units, which increases officer safety. I want to thank Jesus for that. He's been out there tearing units apart, getting into the dash, and figuring out how these things work. So now we can actually track the units out in the field, which is a definite safety issue. And then the Axon body cameras, we now have the cloud storage. For our body cameras, I'm wearing one right now, so now we have the actual cameras. I know other agencies have had them for a while. We've had different variants, and we've had different generations of camera, but nothing solid. So now we actually can comply with our IPRA and FOIA request and actually have redaction software that Jesus is familiar with, so we can actually comply with the IPRA request and the FOIA request now, as far as that's concerned, as releasing video from inside residences and redacting certain things. We also have our video systems at the PD up and working now. That was a big secret, and nothing ever happened at the PD, and I'm glad nothing ever did because it wouldn't have been caught on tape. So now all the systems are up and running and recording, and we have access to those systems. Courts, animal control, town hall, library, all the systems are up and running now and recording over at the PD. So we have access to those to watch the lobbies, see if there's any issues or anything that pop up. We have video of that as well now. So our 2 new hires started Monday. We got them qualified today, got them through the driving courses. They will be going out with their FTOs starting Saturday. So you'll see 2 more officers out starting Saturday. I know it's moving pretty quick because they mentioned in the last meeting we actually brought them forward for hire last meeting. We sped them up through the process a little bit and brought them in Monday. So they were only out about a week and a half. And then with that, we also found a server we were having issues with that, once again, Jesus, and I kind of throwing a lot of praise towards you, but you've been doing a great job. Our discovery requests are now filled. We were following behind on discovery as far as releasing video and photographs to individuals requesting IPRA, and it's because we did not have access to a server whenever we had that change from the private company over to Jesus. So now we have access to that. We were able to fill those. We were on the verge of losing a couple of felony cases because of that, and they have stopped that in the tracks, and they're actually proceeding forward with charges up in Santa Fe on that. So once again, thank you, Jesus, for getting us up to speed on that. But that is all I have.
Thanks, Chief. Has anybody got any questions for the Chief?
And I'll have that next meeting.
You thought you were hiring on as an IT, and you're actually a cop, huh? You're the 12th man.
Don't be too surprised. IT guys are in disguise.
That brings us then to matters from the councilors. Councilor Jaramillo.
Thank you, Mayor, and the public, everyone that's here. I really appreciate you all being here and voicing your opinions. No matter which side you're on, I really do appreciate hearing from you all. And I've heard a lot. And again, I'm just thankful that you're here. I think what we're hearing is that there are more and more restrictions being placed on us by bigger government and more laws. And that means less freedom, piece by piece. And that freedom has come at a price. And I think you're seeing that the people are really not going to stand for those freedoms being kind of chinked away at, okay? And I appreciate what we heard from one of the community members speaking to, you know, let's really get to the core of the issues, such as the emotional issues, the mental health issues. I would add to that cultural issues and spiritual issues as well. And I think she did refer to God also. But really, these laws do not correct people's hearts. And that's really the problem here. I appreciate you, Representative McQueen, for being here and you know, kind of speaking to the bills. And I know you have a very hard job. And I didn't actually look at how you voted on these. But it sounded to me like you were in favor of these 2 bills that did pass. And I'm just kind of curious, who did you think you were representing? Because when I've listened to the phone calls, the emails, the last 2 meetings, the social media outcry, the sheriffs, the law enforcement. I was in Chavez County at the county building when over 800 people were in the building to speak up and listen to the sheriff's statements. I think you were elected to represent the people, and part of that is the people of Edgewood, like you mentioned earlier, that are here. And so now you're hearing from them, and I think it's important for all of us to respect their voices. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Abraham.
I also want to thank everybody that came tonight. There were some people that spoke in favor of us passing this resolution, and there were people who spoke against it. You know, I am pleased that we are a town where you can come and have your voice heard for or against something. You know, I love the fact that everyone in this room felt safe to voice their opinion. That's important. It is very important for us as elected officials to listen to what you say. Here and in Santa Fe, you know, I do believe that each and every one of us were elected to serve you, not to serve our own needs, our own agendas, our own whatever. We are here to do your work, the hard work, the easy work, the fun work, the not so fun work. We're here to listen to you, and it helps us to hear you. You know, I am very pleased that there was an audience of people who were able to speak for and against relatively respectfully, and everybody's voice was heard. So I just want to say thank you, and tonight I am pleased to be your representative. Thank you.
Councilor Abrams.
It's really good to see so many people here. I certainly wish that you come for the next meeting and the one after that and a few after that, and maybe over the next few years, 20 or 30 meetings. We need you here. We need to hear your voice. I'd also wish that I could impart to you some of what I've been through in a lifetime, because that affects the way I feel and think about things. And one of the most near and dear to my heart things is the Constitution of the United States of America. So, that and another near and dear thing is the rule of law. And with that, I'm going to pass the hat, because I don't want to grandstand in front of an audience like this, because there's no need to.
Councilor Hawley.
All right. We're not at action items yet, but I do want to thank all of you as well for your turnout tonight and for sharing your opinions with us. We really need to hear from all of you. On another matter, like I said, this is discussion items. I've got some announcements like I always do. There will be a Basics of Gardening series starting April 11th, and this will be in Moriarty at the DWI Memorial, and it'll be a 6-week session on Thursdays from 5 until 7, and so we'll have the flyer posted, and you might want to check it out if you're interested. And then there is also a series of free diabetes cooking classes coming up, and these also will be on a Thursday starting April 4th from 11:30 until 2:30, and they will be held at the Forest Meadow Baptist Church on 217 in Tejares. And these are sponsored by New Mexico State and the New Mexico Department of Health. Again, these will be posted for your information. And that's all I have tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Next item is matters from the clerk treasurer. Corus.
Mayor, Council, so I just wanted to give you a few updates. The first one is the agreement with the hotel. I'm going to be bringing that back at the next council meeting to make an amendment to the agreement. When the governing body initially passed that agreement, it was under one set tax rate, and we since changed the tax rate, and there was no clause in that amendment to allow for that compensation. And so halfway through his purchasing or his, building the hotel, the tax rate changed. So I'd like to just bring back an amendment. Brought it up to the mayor's attention, and the mayor kind of said, well, what's fair is fair. We changed the rates on him, so we should at least look at adjusting the compensation that he's given per that agreement. So we'll be bringing that back at the next council meeting. I received late last week that the audit has been released from the state auditors, so at the next council meeting, I'll have the auditors out here so we can go over that audit report. I received yesterday from Tax and Rev the tax rates for the town of Edgewood from July to December this year. They are all remaining the same. There's no change in any of the 3 counties. We had a sewer spill on Monday. There was a leak on out of one of the manholes between George Court and Plaza Loop, where the field is, where the hole's at. It was called in on Monday. It was fixed that same day before noon. There was just a plug in the line, so we had a septic pump out there, pumping it out, and then also cleaning up the spill from the ground. And then a jetter came out and cleared the line. I'm not sure if any of you had any calls from people that the septic pumper was not pumping the sewage onto the ground, it was sucking the sewage up for us. And then we'll be sending our letter to NMED, just the notification of the spill and what action we took. We'll send that off tomorrow. And then the District 8 meeting for the Municipal League is scheduled to be in Rio Rancho on April 11th. If you could, please let me know if you would like to attend so I can register you. The deadline for that is April 4th, so please let me know by then. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Matters from the mayor. Got a couple things. Got a first choice update. Last Friday, Councilor Hawley and a number of other people from First Choice in Bernalillo County. Yeah, nobody from Santa Fe was there. They'd already been there. Anyway, we visited the old clinic off out there, their old clinic up on the corner. And First Choice has got an idea to turn that into a mental health facility. And so it's one of them that's, what's the living room?
Living room model.
Living room model is what you call it. And they set up a part of the clinic with couches and stuff and make it feel like it's a real welcoming environment. And Santa Fe County has got some funds they're going to use to get the old building fixed up a little bit. It's kind of in, well, so-so shape. It's
been well used.
Yeah, well used is an understatement, but the pieces were brought in. It's a modular unit that was put together with pieces. There's about 5 or 6 pieces, and where they come together is showing its age and stuff. But anyway, Santa Fe County is going to provide some funds to them to fix it up and improve it. And then Santa Fe County and Bernalillo County will put forth operating funds for, like, say, the next 2 years to get this thing off the ground. It's something new that First Choice hasn't done before. So they're kind of eager to see how it works out. And I don't know just the timetable for that. It's probably going to be later this year that they start to work on it. They do have the new clinic over here, and it does have a mental health part in it. But if this thing works out, they may shift everything over there for the mental health. So that keeps the old building being used so it doesn't fall apart or anything worse, and it brings something else to the community that may or may not be a good thing. I think it'll be a good thing myself. They say they get a lot of people that come down to Albuquerque hospitals that, you know, they're sent there or they take themselves in or whatever, but they can't stay there forever, and they really don't have anything out here to refer them to. So this should take care of, at least they'll have some place that the hospitals can refer them to. The other thing, then, we've got Trash Day going on right now over here at the soccer park. It'll be going on through this Sunday. There's those big dumpsters out there. Let's see. Parks will be closed and gates will be locked after hours. What to accept, car and truckloads only. Vehicles pulling trailers may be redirected to a landfill or transfer station. And then due to landfill regulations, we will not be able to accept freezers, ice makers, tires, large drums, medical waste, paint, asbestos materials, contaminated soil, hazardous household waste, and batteries and railroad ties. So all the good stuff they won't take. But anyway, they will take the other stuff we've got that's junk. And so it's operating over here through Sunday. If you've got something that fits within that, why, bring it on over and you can dump it in there. Yeah, the district meeting there, counselors, is in Rio Rancho this year, so if you want to get signed up with Juan, you need to do that by the 4th. Another development we have over here at the soccer park then is our free Wi-Fi. That's now available over at the soccer field. This is the expansion of the Wi-Fi around this building and stuff that was made available by a grant from the Attorney General's office. So that's now up and running, and it's over there as far as the pavilion. I do want to thank you all for coming out tonight, as always. It's good to see a lot of people show up and voice their opinions. That's all I've got, so we will move along. Next item then is action items. And the first item up is discussion, consideration, and action on Resolution 2019-05, a resolution declaring Town of Edgewood's Second Amendment, Edgewood a Second Amendment preservation town. Councilors, you have it before you there. This was taken in part from, I believe, a resolution that was passed maybe up in Farmington. When we looked at different stuff, there was quite a few of them out there, and we tried to find something that would be reasonable and kind of fit what we thought we heard at that last meeting, so here it is. I will entertain your comments. Okay, in lieu of that, then I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I will make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-05, a resolution declaring Town of Edgewood a Second Amendment preservation town.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve Resolution 2019-05. Excuse me, a resolution declaring Town of Edgewood a Second Amendment preservation town.
Discussion?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, said I wasn't going to grandstand, but I'm going to. We have a rather ugly decision here. Ugly in my personal opinion, because I really do favor the Second Amendment. I own firearms. I hunt with firearms. I've had a gun in my hand since I was about 6 years old. Hunted squirrels when I was a kid, running around in the forests in the north. I've been a sportsman all my life, outside. I enjoy target shooting. I enjoy all kinds of things. I'm also a gunsmith. So it makes a little bit tough on me to say what I've got to say here. This resolution, as is all of the sanctuary resolutions that were passed for all of the other reasons by towns and other governmental organizations all across this nation, are a big mistake. Huge mistake. We, first of all and foremost, are a nation of laws. And by rule of law, we govern and keep an orderly and moral society. When you are against a law, there is a function of government built in by our Constitution whereby you can try that law in a court and get a decision. If you try that law in the court of public opinion and decide that that law is not just, and decide to disobey that law, you are then lawless. By passing this resolution, we are in fact saying that we will be lawless. And I cannot agree with that.
Anybody else have anything to say?
I also want to share my struggle with this decision here tonight. I did call for a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution to be brought forth at this council meeting, but I've been struggling with this decision for the last 2 weeks. I've heard from constituents who weren't comfortable speaking here at the meeting. But I also want to back up and say, you know, we've got SAS here in our community. They're a valued and important member of this community. I've personally qualified for my CCL at the Bighorn Gun Club shooting range. I support the Second Amendment. And all of us took an oath when we were elected to this council to support the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, state laws, and our Edgewood ordinances and resolutions. Like I said, this is a real struggle for me. Personally, I'm asking myself, what will adopting the Second Amendment sanctuary resolution do for Edgewood? It is ceremonial. We, the town council, have no legal authority to change what's been signed into law. And as to the issue of constitutionality, that has to be decided by the judicial branch of the government. I know many of you have been to the legislature when they were in session to lobby, and that's where the laws are discussed and passed and signed into law. I'm not really sure, you know, what we're doing, you know, if we pass this resolution.
I would like to have some discussion as well. The way I see this is we are listening to our citizens by passing this resolution.
Any further discussion?
Well, before we call for a vote, I'd like to say one other thing. The fear and loathing that has been going through this nation about all kinds of different things is tearing it apart. And I see this as one more step towards anarchy. And with that, I'll hand it to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. That being done, we'll call for a vote. We'll do this one on a roll call vote. Start on that end. Councilor Jaramillo.
Proudly, aye.
Councilor Abraham.
Aye.
Councilor Abrams.
Gladly that I have my guns at home. Nay.
Councilor Hawley.
Nay.
We have a tie vote. Mayor votes aye. Next item for discussion, consideration and action is on the financial report for the month of February 2019.
Mayor, Council, what you have before you is the financial report for the month of February. Now with the GRT distribution, I know in your normal packet, it's always a month earlier or a month before. The March information was not posted as of the packet time, so I didn't include it. So that's the same figures you saw at the last meeting. So with that, I stand for any questions.
I have a question on, I know we said that the water leak is fixed at the police station. This month we had a $1,500 gas bill. Does that relate to the water leak? Were they leaking hot water, or what might that be?
Mayor, Council, I am not sure on that one as to why that bill is so high.
Okay, can you check into it?
I will look into that and let you guys know.
All right. The other thing I had was a $9,700 bill to Rocky Mountain Water and Wastewater.
Yes, Mayor, Council, those were the last two payments made to Rocky Mountain Water and Wastewater for their contract service for the town for operating the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
That's 2 payments?
Yes, Mayor, Council, that is 2 payments.
That's all I have. Thank you.
A couple of questions. First, I saw the GRT jump up significantly. Do we have any idea what that's from? I know it's really hard to tell, and the state's black box doesn't really allow us to see, but it is a pretty big change from the retail trade total in January was 152,000 and February was 190, which is, out of trend.
Mayor, Council, that one is actually Christmas shopping.
Okay. I was going to say, yeah,
So
February of 18
for the
was
month
also
of December,
very big.
and then they have until January to report it to the state. Then the state gets to process it, so then we don't receive
the
it
next month. Right. Okay.
So yeah, that is Christmas shopping. So thank you all for shopping. I appreciate it.
Thank you for shopping local. Helps our roads. Okay, and then also Mr. Simons had brought forward some information on billings, and you were going to check into that and get back to us. And I was just curious if you had researched anything.
I'm still looking into it, and I have also, in the meantime, requested quotes from our software vendor to actually get a true utility billing system installed.
Okay.
Which actually will keep the true record of the account versus the Excel spreadsheets that we're using right now. So once I have all that together, I will let you know.
Okay. And then along those lines, I just wanted to let you know that I did pull down example policies from other municipalities. And so I have a packet that I think we can go over together, and this should be a pretty good starting point for the town.
Thank you.
So.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the financial report for the month of February 2019.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the financial report for the month of February 2019. Start down there, Councilor Abraham.
Aye.
Councilor Abrams.
Aye.
Councilor Holly.
Aye.
Councilor Jaramillo.
Aye.
Thank you, Council. Next item then is calendar review, and you'll notice we don't have a date on there for the April meeting. April's going to be kind of a weird month for us. What we need to do is consider shifting the meeting from the 3rd to the 10th. We've got that audit report we want to go over and stuff, and Juan can't be here, and I don't think Carla can be here either on the 3rd. So we need to set the first meeting for the 10th, and that's also going to, their clerk school is going to mess up the one on the 17th. So we may look to shift that one just out to the 1st of May. Flip side is we're looking at the meeting on the sewer workshop and also maybe one on the water issue. So they will be probably coming in at some point. I can't tell you right now just where, but I'd like to shift the first meeting to the 10th.
No problem with that.
So we would have only one meeting that month?
No, we're going to have more meetings, but of our regular ones, it'll be the one on the 10th, and then probably the one on, the next one would be the 1st.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a district meeting. Which day did you say that was?
The 11th.
Did you say the 1st as in 1st of April?
1st of May.
No, 1st of May.
Yeah.
Okay,
May's
so
not
then it
up
would
there,
be...
but that would be the next Wednesday one. So we still need to figure out on the sewer ordinance workshop, it's a thing of finding a time for those experts to come out here. Weekends are pretty much out. Late afternoon, evening would be best for them. And it would probably work best like on a Monday night, because P&Z's moved to Tuesdays. Also Parks and Recs on the last Tuesday or the 3rd or 4th Tuesday. So like a Monday night or a Thursday or a Friday.
Okay, Mayor, right now I'm spending Monday nights and Thursday nights with my mother.
Okay.
So both of those days are very bad for me.
Friday'd be better for you?
Friday would be better for me.
Okay, so we got the 12, but again, Carly, you've got to line up with these people.
I spoke to the COG and I spoke to Rural Water, And the only indication to me was that they would prefer a weeknight and they would rather not do a weekend.
Right.
So that's when they will make themselves available.
Okay.
Do we ask any of the local, I know Mr. Cannon came and spoke to us one night,
I
and
actually
he,
reached out to Mr. Cannon. I'm waiting to hear back from him, but
Okay.
I will invite him.
because he did help with Bernalillo County's resolution writing, so.
So the 12th or the 26th, we're off on the 19th. That's a holiday one. Try for either one of those.
Well, if the municipal district meeting is the 11th?
Yeah.
Is that going to be a conflict for anyone to then have a meeting on the 12th as well? No?
It's a lot in 1 week.
Yep.
Well, there's always the 26th.
Why don't we go for the 26th, since we're having a town council meeting on the 10th, and then the municipal thing on the 11th? I think maybe the 26th would work better.
Okay,
For me.
Carla, so shoot that out there and see if that's compatible with them.
Early start time, 5:30, 6:30?
If it's, I don't know, you want to start it earlier in the day?
I think I'm going to be busy in the morning. I'll have to check my calendar, but later would be better for me.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting early morning, just earlier than the council meeting, like by an hour or at the same time.
I could be available by 5:30.
How about that? And I'll just run that by all of
5:30?
those people. Okay.
We can try that.
Well, for the citizens to get back from work from Albuquerque, you know, that takes a little while. I think we shouldn't push it earlier than 6.
6? I will ask that. Okay.
I'm going to be here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we good on going on the 10th?
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, next item is closed session. As per motion, roll call vote pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 1015-1H2. The following will be discussed in closed session, limited personnel matters, specifically as it relates to the Parks and Rec Department. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we go into closed session pursuant to NMSA 1978, 1015-1H2 to discuss limited personnel matters pertaining to Parks and Rec.
Got a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to go into closed session. We'll do it on a roll call vote. Start here. Counselor Hawley?
Aye.
Counselor Abrams?
Aye.
Counselor Abraham?
Aye.
Counselor Jaramillo?
Aye.
We're in closed session.
Yeah, I'm more used to this.
Is this the more regularly adorned council chamber?
Good night, Cheryl.
Good night, Cheryl.
Let's go back into open session.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we come back into open session.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to come back into open session. Do it with a roll call vote. Start there. Counselor Jaramillo?
Aye.
Counselor Abraham?
Aye.
Counselor Abrams?
Aye.
And Counselor Hawley?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to also affirm that in closed session, only the topic on the agenda was discussed and no decisions were made regarding the personnel issue.
Let's do, okay, Counselor Abrams has made the affirmation. Let's do a roll call to confirm it. Counselor Hawley?
I so affirm.
Counselor Abraham?
I so affirm.
Counselor Jaramillo?
I so affirm.
And for the mayor, I so affirm. Next item is adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? What do we got?
Aye.
8:38.
Aye, aye, aye.
Were you planning for a party?
No, I didn't get a chance to stop for dinner. I had to leave late. I have been writing programming all week, and I get in the zone, and I look up, and the sun is going.